Welcome to another edition of PowerCore Productions and Podcastings. And in today's video, we're going to be continuing My Hero Academia, Heroes of the Morphing Grid, the Psycho Wars arc. What if Deku was a Power Ranger, Part 17. As always, if you're new to the channel or if you're a regular and like what we have to offer, then please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share, and hit that bell for post notifications so you can stay up to date on everything that is PowerCore Productions and Podcastings that has to come out now and in the future. So with today's video, this marks the final part in the Psycho Wars arc of What If Deku Was a Power Ranger. And the next stage we'll get into will be the Vigilante arc, as it's known in the back half of Season 6 of My Hero Academia. Now, I do want you guys to keep in mind that the final few parts aren't going to be all that long. In fact, we'll only have 3 more parts to go, including tomorrow's video and the 2 videos next week before we pretty much complete Season 6, and we'll have to wait until Season 7 comes around. But I do want to say thank you to everyone who has been a part of the continuation of this story, because I was honestly surprised to see how many fans I had for What If Deku Was a Power Ranger. And who knows, maybe we'll do more Power Ranger stuff in the future, but that remains to be seen. But anyway, without further ado, let's get into today's video. So, as always, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. What is justice? Is it truth? Freedom? Is it truly the belief in something right? What is justice to you? Is it something worth fighting for? Is it something worth dying for? What is freedom? Is freedom the ability to do what you want? Is freedom having the restraint to do what is right? For many, they have their own definitions of these terms, these ideals. And more often than not, these ideals are only set in stone by those who have the power to enforce it. On this particular day, it was a clash of wills between 2 sides, ones having their own ideals of freedom and justice, their own beliefs, things that they were willing to stand for, things that they were willing to die for, things that had been set in stone hundreds of years before their time. The sides were held by 2 set of rangers, the Power Rangers and the Psycho Rangers. Izuku and his team battling against the League of Villains, the Psychos. The fight was chaotic on both sides. Pro-heroes, high advanced nomus, monsters of all likings, a city left in ruins, nothing remaining but carnage and destruction. Today was a day that would change hero society forever. It was a day that they knew that things would never be the same. The villains fought valiantly. Shigaraki had yet to awaken. The villains doing their best to hold their own. While the Rangers fought, some operating the Zords while others were on the ground. The villains found themselves backed into a corner. The blue Psycho Ranger, Mr. Compress, would use the extensive power of his abilities to hold off the Rangers long enough for Psycho Red, Spinner, to awaken their master. Finding one of the severed hands that Shigaraki would often carry wrapped around his body and on his face, the hand would be placed onto the charred face of Shigaraki as a warped and malice voice would awaken within him. Shigaraki was fueled only by hatred, a pure, deep-seated anger that could not be quelled. A hatred that was festered long ago in the days of his youth. A hatred that would just as soon burn not only himself, but the entire world around him. However, the voice that spoke was not that of Shigaraki himself, but rather it was a voice that was merely imitating his own, the undertones of it being none other than All For One himself. All For One had but so much control of the body. The only thing he knew for certain was that Shigaraki was not yet ready. The boy was not yet prepared to use his power to the fullest of extent. But he had other plans in mind for now. He would call for a retreat. Of course, a few other members of the League were not entirely thrilled with this. After all, this was supposed to be their moment, the day where they would make a stand. This wasn't how they were supposed to go out. However, Shigaraki would assure them, now was not the time. The world that they all yearned for would eventually be created. He would rule as the ultimate power and authority. And this time, once he acquired One for All, there would be nothing that could stop him. Using the immense amount of quirks stored within himself, All For One, using his vestige to control Shigaraki's body, would mount an escape, calling forth any Nomu that survived, all of them returning to his side as they all attempted to make their escape. The heroes would give chase after them. After all, for everything that happened, for everything that had gone down, the only thing that mattered was bringing in Tomura Shigaraki. Even the Rangers would give chase. However, they were unable to make their capture. Izuku would get one final look at Shigaraki, although what he saw was not just Shigaraki himself, but the silhouette of All For One looming over him. Izuku almost felt like he saw someone in need, someone that had to be saved. But even through Shigaraki's own eyes, they were not that of a pleading boy looking for help. No, they were the eyes of someone who was determined to see the world burn. With that, the villains would escape. The heroes would be left, or at least whatever remained of them. This was the full report of what happened, the synopsis of that day's events. First, the hero team that led the raid onto the hospital that would lead to the awakening of Shigaraki. The villa hideout for the Paranormal Liberation Army would be raided upon. Hawks, with the assistance of Class 1B's Red Alien Ranger Monoma, would take down the villain known as Twice, former Silver Psycho Ranger. Their cover would be discovered by Dabi, who would take the form of the Black Psycho Ranger, launching the counter-strike. The battle would begin on both fronts, the League discovering that they had been the ones in control, and that they had been on to the schemes of the heroes. The heroes as well would learn news of the League of Villains having Ranger powers and being able to tap into the Morphing grid. This led to the awakening of Giganto Makima, who would be slowed down thanks to the aid of Melissa Shields, as well as Momo Yaoyorozu, the Yellow and White Ranger respectively. Due to the course of events, Miss Midnight, who was aided by the work-steady students, would be saved at the last moment by Momo using the saber-toothed tiger Zord, catching her in mid-air before she could be crushed by rubble and debris. Thankfully, the efforts of Momo Yaoyorozu and her neuro gas was able to slow down Makima, who was eventually captured by the heroes. Also, thanks to the help of the Rangers in the evacuation, being able to carry multiple loads of civilians using their Zords, they were able to clear out the city almost entirely. So, in short, there were no civilian casualties in this encounter. Honestly, that was the one bit of good news that they had. Unfortunately, the city and the livelihoods of many in Ninjaku City would be up in rubble, all because of Shigaraki and his decay wave that would reduce the city to almost nothing. However, this would not be the only wrap-up in detail. Redestro, along with the Paranormal Liberation Front lieutenants, would also be captured during the day's events. Despite there not being any civilian casualties, the casualty on the hero's side would be great. Also, due to the unfortunate circumstance involving Dabi, and with him exposing the sins of Endeavor, the public's faith in heroes had been shaken more than ever before. Following the battle, Miss Midnight would take many of the students back to UA, wanting to shield them from the ugliness of it all. However, that was not something that could easily be hidden. You see, just because Miss Midnight did not die in these events, it doesn't mean that these students were not scarred. There were still bodies, a lot of bodies, of heroes strewn all throughout the streets. Some worser than others. The students got a good look at what can happen to a hero. You don't get to go out often in the blaze of glory the way you hoped. Sometimes you go out in a whimper. Sometimes you go out in the most excruciating, most agonizing of ways. You don't get thank yous, you don't get praise. You get a cold, waking reality. Death is impartial to everyone, and you can go at any time. All the same, the civilians of Japan were not in a good mood. For so long, they had had faith in heroes, but that faith had been shook. And for the heroes themselves, this went all the way back then. Back when the first Nomu attacked at UA. That was the early signs of everything that was changing in the world. And the heroes, in their arrogance, they were too blind to see it. That day had marked the beginning. It showed that the villains were different. They evolved. It was the fact that they were even so brazen enough to challenge All Might, even if he was in the twilight of his prime. And once All Might went down, what was left? Slowly, the faith in the heroes were stripped away more and more, to the point now where they didn't know who to believe. They didn't know who to trust. What were they supposed to do? They had taken for granted their time of peace. And now, an age of chaos and destruction reigned. Many heroes began to retire. They simply couldn't take it. Not just the older heroes, many of whom coasted on the coattails of their past deeds, but even younger heroes as well. What were they supposed to do? It seemed like no matter what they did, the civilians hated them. Some were even starting to become sympathetic to the villains. After all, what was the point? For so long, the heroes were only praised because the civilians thought that they were safe all the time, because the heroes were never given any pushback. And the moment they faced adversity, a little discomfort, they were ready to turn their back on the ones who had been watching over them. Being a hero truly was a thankless position. When everything went right, there was hardly any praise to go around. But when things went wrong, you can believe there was a lot of scrutiny. But what about our main heroes? Deku remained unconscious for a time, as he met with the other vestiges of One for All. where he would learn the truth of One for All and its abilities. That the power, it wasn't just any ordinary power, and it wasn't just for anyone to be able to wield. No, the power of One for All worked best with those who were quirkless. Surprisingly enough, it was because ones that were quirkless that had no power to begin with were able to take in the full effects of One for All. However, the problem, as I'm sure many of you know or have come to know, is that almost 80% of the world's population had quirks, and that 20% was a great minority, a minority that shrunk day by day. Because more often than not, those who were quirkless would end up marrying someone with a quirk anyway, unless they die off. Eventually, those who were quirkless in the world would start to become more and more of the rarity. Heck, for someone like Izuku, he would probably be the last user of One for All. However, that wasn't the only reason for the visit. One of the previous users of One for All, the one known as Nana Shimura, the grandmother of Tomura Shigaraki, would ask Izuku if he had the resolve to kill him, to kill her grandson. After all, even if he was family, it didn't change all of the want, destruction, and murder he had caused in the world. That wasn't something that could be forgiven. And yet, even still, Izuku stilled his own resolve. Even if the power of One for All was created solely to destroy All for One, it still didn't mean he didn't want to help others, that he didn't want to save anyone that he could. That included Shigaraki. However, within the Vestiges of One for All, Izuku would also meet with other Vestiges. They were previous users of the Six, many of the Sixth Rangers. They too would offer their support to Izuku. Izuku wondering how it was possible that he could even meet them. Among them all that spoke, the Quantum Ranger would step forward. I think I can explain what's going on here. Under normal circumstances, being connected to the morphing grid wouldn't be enough for you to connect to all of us in a way. However, when you took in the power of One for All, you are connected to the previous users of One for All. I believe the power is so strong, you're loosely connected to those who also share in the power of the Six. But what is the power of the Six? Why isn't it like the other Ranger powers? Like red, blue, yellow, all of them. I mean, you're all different colors, different powers, abilities. The power of the Six is something far greater than anything else. Technically speaking, we are Rangers who were never meant to exist. However, we have come together as a force for good, and as such, we are recognized as the outsider that was welcomed in. Almost like you, one who was quirkless but was welcomed into the society of quirk users. But wait, if those who had a quirk before going to die, then what about me? When I gained my Ranger powers, it jump-started the DNA in my body. Yeah, I was once quirkless, but that was only because of the recessive quirk genes within me. They got supercharged and awoke. That's how I have my own quirk, Emerald Flame. Yes, that is the case, but it doesn't change the fact that you were born quirkless, Izuku. Like I've said before, those who are quirkless are like an empty cup that are able to take in the full body of water. Unlike us, those who had quirks, we already had some water inside. Taking on that extra power, it just meant that it would overflow within us, causing our cup to spill over and to break. However, you were in a unique circumstance. When you were quirkless for so long, your cup was already exponentially big, so that by the time you gained a quirk, you were able to hold it in, as well as holding in One for All. I guess in a roundabout way of saying, the first user would continue to explain. You are what I would like to call a rare exception. You were a part of a series of events that couldn't even be foreseen. Let's just say that you having a quirk and taking in One for All, under the circumstances that you did, are a 1 in a million chance. Under any other normal circumstances, your life expectancy would be cut short dramatically. But because the steps were taken in the way that they were, it meant that you were able to pass that problem. However, not everyone will be in a situation like you. That's why you are the outlier. You're the exception, not the standard, if that makes sense. And for Izuku, that did make sense. This wasn't something that could just be replicated under any circumstance. To find someone that was quirkless, to let them connect with a ranger power to the morphing grid itself, to jumpstart their quirk, and then to be passed down one for all. Those series of events could only play out so many times before eventually the well ran dry. And while it might have worked for Izuku this time around, there's no guarantee it could work for anyone else. Izuku was definitely a rare exception under these circumstances. But for now, that we're left with nothing more but to wait. Izuku would in time have to learn to use the other abilities of One for All. For now, he had to awaken. There were other things that needed to be discussed. As Izuku awoke in his room, he would find the other rangers in there with him. Todoroki and Bakugo looked worse for wear. Ida, Uraraka, Momo, Melissa, they were fine for the most part. Lil Alpha would come waddling in along with All Might. Ooh! Izuku, you're okay! Hey Alpha, I'm fine. Damn idiot, Bakugo would say. Having us worried like that, thought you were never gonna wake up. It's alright, young Bakugo, All Might would say. He was preoccupied, weren't you? Yeah, I was. Izuku would explain to all of the Rangers what had happened. You see, in this universe, while all of Class 1A are not aware of Izuku's secret with One for All, only the Rangers know of this information. After all, it was the Rangers that fought beside All Might against All for One back during his final battle, and it was Izuku that was passed down the power. So, all the Rangers were aware. As Izuku explained to them the situation, all of them had a bitter look on their face. So what are you going to do? Shoto would ask. Well, I still want to try to save him if I can. It means I'm going to have to try to master this power. But we're not safe. If he has the quirk search, he'll be able to find me. Just sitting in this hospital. Don't even think about it, Bakugo would say. If you think about trying to run off, then you truly are an idiot. What are you going to do once he catches you? The best thing you can do is stay here and be protected by everyone. But what about the public? Word is, they're starting to ask about One for All. Even if we wanted to, we can't keep it a secret forever. And what about us as Rangers? All of UA don't know yet. Mr. Aizawa might be able to figure something out, Ida would say. For now, let's not do anything too hasty. You just need to focus on recovering and building back up your strength. And remember, you're not alone. As the students would leave, Best, Genus, and Hawks would arrive. They wanted to speak to All Might about One for All and the Power Rangers. Endeavor would hold a press conference. He would not shy away from the truth of his past or about what he had done. Of course, many had their concerns. Could they really trust the heroes at this point? For Endeavor, the only thing he could do was ask that they watch him. He would atone for what he had done by continuing to be the best hero that he could be. In the meantime, UA and other school facilities would open their doors to the civilians that had been saved, along with others who would be seeking refuge. Thankfully, the efforts of the Rangers did not go unnoticed. At the very least, getting civilians to safety was something the heroes could still do. The Zords would be working overtime, with Melissa manning all of them from the command center that was stationed in the center of UA's campus. All Might would check on the young girl to make sure she wasn't working herself ragged, the girl sitting at one computer as she used her quirk elasticity to stretch her arms all across the workspace, typing on buttons and going through all of the data that she could. The girl was just like her father, and she was working overtime for everyone's sake. Thankfully, she had called her dad, who was still on Island. They were all fine for the most part, and he was helping in other ways to prepare them for the worst. Shinzo would return to Class 1A as well, Monoma as well to Class 1B. The other members of Class 1B, including Kendo, were all worried about him. He had changed in a lot of ways. Of course, he still had his annoying attitude from time to time, but deep down, they saw the heart of a hero. After all, for everything he had done, he did it to protect his friends and his class. They were like family to him, and no matter how he felt about Class 1A, he loved his Class 1B. He wasn't going to let anyone or anything harm them. He still thought about what Davi said, the threat he made. It didn't matter what happened to him. The one thing he knew for sure, he wasn't going to let anyone harm his friends. That he promised. Under the cover of night, as the students had returned back to their dorms, Izuku had finished the last letter. He had written down everything he wanted to say. He had them placed at everyone's door, for those that knew and for those that didn't. The final letter he came to as he sealed an envelope, he left with a package as he slipped a coin inside of the envelope. After setting it down, he went to the Rangers command center. As he did so, he looked through the shelves to find what he needed. A couple of gadgets, a couple of tools. The standard Ranger gun and blaster. These weren't the special auxiliary weapons that the Rangers had. No, these were the regular gun/sword mode weapons that they had at their disposal. Simple and easy enough to carry. You didn't need a morpher for it. As he slung his bag over his shoulder, he heard a voice. "Where are you going?" "Alpha? I thought you'd be in rest mode right now." I don't need to rest. I was checking on Melissa. She's asleep at her computer right now." "I see. You're leaving, aren't you?" "You don't have to go. We've been working on something we want to show you, and I know. It's probably going to be something really cool. You guys will be just fine. I know you will. You're all great Rangers and heroes. This is my way of helping you guys out. But you'll be alone." Izuku smiled as he patted Alpha on the head. "Alpha, please do me a favor. Don't tell anyone, okay? I've already found a way to tell them myself, but I'd rather they figure it out that way. Please?" The little robot would nod, Izuku giving him a hug, and Alpha hugging him back. "Take care of yourself, and may the power protect you. Always. And may the power protect you, my friend." With that, Alpha would be placed in rest mode, lying on the desk with Melissa. Izuku would adjust the blanket that she had, putting it over her. He smiled as he exited the room. The next morning, everyone would awaken. Not only the Rangers, but the other students of Class 1A. They would read the letters, and they would learn the truth. Bakugo would meet with Ida, Uraraka, Momo, Melissa, and Todoroki, all of them having received the letters as well. Did he just expose us? Not really, Todoroki would say. We were gonna have to tell them sooner or later. Honestly, this was probably the best that we could do. It ain't just that though. Look! In Bakugo's hands, he held a Morpher and the Dragon Coin. He's leaving his Morpher behind? Uraraka would say. Yeah. In my letter, Bakugo showed them. He passed the Dragon Coin to me. That way we can still operate the Dragon Zord without him. And we have the power of the dragon to boost our skills. But Uraraka, tears welling in her eyes as Momo and Melissa would comfort her. That idiot. In the beginning of April, Deku, the one known as Izuku Midoriya, wielder of One for All, and the Green Dragon Ranger, left UA. As Izuku stood on a building in the tattered remains of his hero costume, his power blaster and power sword on his holster, he watched as a crowd of civilians would be making their way. Another villain, Izuku thought. He donned his mask and jumped into action. He was going to make things right. One for All would be protected. His friends would be protected. And if All for One wanted a fight, then he had one coming. This concludes My Hero Academia, Heroes of the Morphing Grid, the Psycho Wars arc. What If Deku Was a Power Ranger? Part 17. And with that, this concludes the Psycho Wars arc for What If Deku Was a Power Ranger. Stay tuned for tomorrow's video, as we will continue What If Deku Was a Power Ranger Part 18, as we begin the Vigilante arc. But anyway, that's going to do it for the end of today's video. I'm Javon Harrington with PowerCore Productions and Podcastings, signing off, and I'll see you next time.